NewsX World, I'm Megha Sharma, and let's take a look at the top stories of the hour. Violent protests in Nepal now escalate as the Nepalese Prime Minister KP Oli resigns. The President of the country, Ramchandra Paudel, has now accepted his resignation, and the President's office says that the process to appoint a new leader has already begun. Former Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra has been ordered to serve a one-year jail term. He has accepted the court's verdict and expressed gratitude to the king for his reduced sentence. He further vowed to continue serving the nation, the monarchy and the people with unwavering dedication. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has expressed deep sympathy over the detention of hundreds of South Korean workers in Georgia, calling it heavy responsibility. Meanwhile, Seoul has dispatched its envoy to Washington to push for the prompt release of the migrants. French Prime Minister François Bayrou has now lost his confidence vote in the parliament amidst warnings of life-threatening national debt. This deepens the political crisis and hands President Emmanuel Macron the task of appointing the country's fifth Prime Minister in under 2 years. The Prime Minister will be resigning later today. The US Supreme Court has backed President Donald Trump's hardline immigration policy, allowing raids in Southern California based on race, ethnicity, or language. The ruling, criticized by liberals and California Governor Gavin Newsom, clears the way for escalated deportation operations amidst ongoing legal challenges. America's Democratic Party has released a letter that was allegedly penned by Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump has denied doing so and has called the report false and defamatory. He filed a $10 billion lawsuit against Wall Street Journal for releasing this birthday greeting. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar suggests that the European countries could establish a Palestinian state of their own territory. This comes as UK, France and Belgium reaffirm support for state recognition ahead of the UN General Assembly later this month. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met the Portuguese Prime Minister, expressing willingness to strengthen strategic communication and cooperate on safeguarding the global free trade system. Portugal has urged Xi to leverage China's close ties with Russia to push for peace in Ukraine. Big story of the hour. Violent protests in Nepal have reached a critical point as Prime Minister KP Oli has resigned amidst escalating protests. According to reports, President of Nepal Paudel has begun the process to appoint a new leader. Demonstrators have torched the homes of President Ramchandra Paudel and Prime Minister Oli, amongst other union ministers of Nepal. This comes as the Finance Minister Bishnu Prasad Paudel has been attacked, and the Supreme Court and the Attorney General's office have also been vandalized. The country's parliament has been burnt down as well. Meanwhile, the government officials are being evacuated by helicopters from the Bhai Sepati ministerial quarters to Tribhuvan International Airport located in Kathmandu. Protesters are using social media to disrupt air traffic with fireworks, drones and laser lights, causing delays. In response to the escalating violence, embassies of Australia, France, Japan, Korea, United Kingdom, Norway, Germany and United States of America have issued a joint statement on the Nepal protests. They extended their condolences to the families of the victims and all those affected, wishing a swift and full recovery to the injured. The statement also reaffirmed strong support for the universal rights of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression, urging all parties to exercise maximum restraint, avoid further escalation, and ensure that these fundamental rights are protected. I have with me Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He is a former Indian ambassador. He is joining me from New Delhi. Ambassador Sachdev, things have come to a knot where the parliament of Nepal is being burnt down. The president's residence has been burnt down. KP Oli, the prime minister who's just resigned, his residence has been burnt down. The foreign minister's privately owned school has been burnt down. Do you think this has breached the maximum limit of the police now not being able to curtail the crowd?
Thank you, Megha. The situation is quite precarious and fraught with all sort of dangers. So one would not like to speculate, but at one level, it is symptomatic of the popular alienation from the institutions as well as the political hierarchy. People seem to have very little trust in the institutions and the politicians that run it. On the other hand, the politicians seem to have major disconnect between themselves and the popular masses. Suffice to say that 1/3 of Nepal's GDP comes from remittances sent by Nepalese outside. Now, tourism is another major driver of the economy. Both of these depend on social media. You know, WhatsApp and Twitter and other things are used all the time to communicate in a country like Nepal, which, as it is mountainous and has logistical challenges.
Right.
Now, for politicians to suddenly decide that they need to regulate this powerful and lucrative media on which livelihood of so many people depend.
Yeah, but
Speaks,
the ban of the social media platforms in Nepal was a trigger. There has been outrage that has been simmering amongst the locals, especially the youth, that has transcended into this massive chaos, huge protests that have now turned violent. And is it any surprise that KP Oli, the former president of Nepal, has I think perhaps, as we are getting information as per reports that are floating, is likely to flee to Dubai. So are his other ministers in the cabinet who are likely to flee Nepal at this point of time. What do you think is going to happen in the coming days?
Well, as I began, it'll be unwise to speculate as to where is who heading. But what one can safely surmise is that Nepal is in for a difficult time, and the institutions rebuilding would take pretty long. Now, the only institutions that perhaps could serve the country at this stage is armed forces. Nepal has a proud tradition of being a warrior country. Gurkhas have served in a number of countries, including India, Britain, and elsewhere. So perhaps eventually army would need to step in and provide a transitional government, or at least make sure that people who are co-opted into transitional government has its protection and are allowed some time, and then the new constitution would have to be prepared and elections, etc., held. Now, Nepal also has a very important geostrategic situation where it lies between India and China. And China and India have recently started to mend their relations afresh after Galwan. And Nepal is a flashpoint potentially between the two countries, where the two countries compete for for
Right.
influence
Also,
in
we're
Nepal.
getting information, there is a number of Indian nationals who reside in Nepal. There has been an advisory that has been issued by the Ministry of External Affairs. There are numbers that have also been shared that in case of emergency, people can contact these numbers, they can approach the embassy, they can approach the consulates. And could there be at this point of time any possibility, because direct flights between private flights between India and Kathmandu have been halted for the time being, but could there be a possibility in the coming hours, perhaps even, that there could be evacuations, airlifts that the government will have to do?
Numbers are pretty large. Nepal is a neighboring country, and there are Madhesis who live in Tarai, who have close links with Bihar and UP-based Indians. And evacuation is certainly a possibility, particularly of diplomatic staff and dependent of Government of India employees. And I think we have had experience of evacuating people from dangerous situations, including Yemen, Sudan, and elsewhere. So I think this situation, as it evolves, let's hope that it will calm down itself by now that the political elite has decided to withdraw the bill banning social media. It should lead to calming of the situation, and much would happen in 6 o'clock meeting that President has called to discuss the follow-up of the situation. So let's hope that things would calm down. But yes,
Right.
in the final analysis, evacuation of sensitive people, vulnerable people, tourists, etc., who are stuck there remains an option.
Right, absolutely. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, thank you for joining me, sharing those inputs. Of course, Nepal continues to boil even as the protesters are unrelenting in their demonstrations that have turned massively violent, causing a lot of strife and chaos in the region. Shifting our focus to the other big development, where the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the European Union and the United States of America to take stronger action against continued Russian attacks targeting civilians. Zelensky has warned that more international support is needed to protect Ukrainian citizens and hold Russia accountable for the ongoing violence. The urgency comes after a Russian strike on Donetsk region claimed 20 people, worsening the humanitarian crisis. As per reports, Moscow has claimed the industrial region as part of Russia, and Kyiv says that Kremlin has amassed 100,000 troops at the key parts of the front line for a fresh offensive. I have with me Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. He's joining me from New Delhi. Thank you very much. And what's your perspective? Of course, the president of Ukraine has been reaching out to heads of states from across the globe, whether it is Europe or we talk about India and other countries as well. Now, a simple message that has been, equivocally condemning Russia and its offensive on Ukraine, particularly in wake of these 20 new deaths that have been reported along the border on Donetsk. Do you think there is any peace on the anvil, or at least a temporary ceasefire?
Well, another very sad news, as you said, more than 20, 23, I think they reported killed in one strike in Yarova, which is Donetsk, which is very close to the front line. And this is Ukrainian territory. Well, everything is Ukrainian territory legally by international law. Russia is an aggressor and war criminal, and it is very clear for everybody, for every observer, for every lawyer, for every reasonable person around the world. And he continues, President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to repeat the same for 3.5 years, that his country is invaded by an aggressor, brutal aggressor, cruel, killing civilians mostly. The Russians don't advance much on the battlefield. They kill civilians. We saw another strike on Kiev, also very murderous, only a couple of days ago. And obviously the European and American and all countries in the world should do two things. One is to continue to support Ukraine, financially, militarily, even morally, by expressing condolences and by expressing sympathy with the fate of those killed, but also with their entire nation, which is fighting a war of survival for the last 3.5 years. And the second thing they should do is to sanction Russia, to stop buying oil and gas from Russia. And it goes to every country in the world. Europeans did it already. They imposed sanctions 3.5 years ago. Very minimal quantities are still there, but they will be also eliminated very soon. But large countries like China and India continue, even double the import of Russian oil and gas. And that's absolutely unacceptable, immoral. That fuels the war, that gives Putin more weapons, more drones to kill more civilians in Ukraine.
Okay, also, there's always a flip side to the story, particularly with regards to the close ties that the Trump administration has now built in the last few months, particularly with Pakistan, where Pakistan continues to be the terror hub. Pakistan continues to fuel terrorism into India, in Kashmir, and with more of these business deals that Trump is signing with Pakistan, which is only providing more financial support to sponsor these terrorists that are hiding, that have their bases in Pakistan. Should the Trump administration also consider fueling terrorism from Pakistan into India?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Again, we have a very incompetent, to put it mildly, administration since January in the White House. And the chaos they created everywhere in the world with repeated tariffs, with inconsistencies, with all policies effectively produce immense damage on international law, on international trade. As you said correctly, sometimes supporting regimes that fuel terrorism and do not take the proper measures to reduce those conflicts, to make peace. In fact, the whole paradox here is that the administration and Donald Trump himself claims to be a peacemaker, doing exactly the opposite. In fact, his actions prolonged the war in Russia-Ukraine. It prolonged the war in the Middle East. It didn't solve a single conflict. In fact, the one that was solved between Armenia and Azerbaijan were not because the White House. It's not because Donald Trump. The negotiations go back many months before that. So we have a very narcissistic, egoistic, criminal president. He himself was convicted 34 times anonymously by an independent jury of crimes committed in the United States. He should be imprisoned. He should not be the US president in a normal times. So you're absolutely correct with your frustration with the support that this administration is giving to Pakistan. I'm 100% with you on that.
Thank you very much, Professor, for joining me and sharing your views. I'm going to shift my focus to the tariff wars and the massive impact that Germany has witnessed on its auto industry. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has now announced plans for an auto summit within the next 4 to 6 weeks to boost Germany's car industry. He stressed securing raw materials without creating new dependence, urged de-escalation of trade tensions with America, and highlighted the need for innovation, quality and sustainable battery production. Merz called for a comprehensive overhaul to maintain Germany's global automotive leadership. Here's a look at what the German Chancellor said.
Unser Ziel ist, dass Deutschland auch zukünftig zu den führenden Automobilstandorten und Produktionsstandorten auf der Welt gehört. Ich sage es noch etwas deutlicher. Wir wollen den Wandel der Autoindustrie gestalten und ihm nicht hinterherlaufen. Und wir wollen die großen Chancen, die in dieser Gestaltung liegt, für die deutsche Automobilindustrie und für Deutschland insgesamt vertraglichen Vereinbarungen dauerhaft abwenden. Ich gebe zu, ich hätte mir ein anderes, ein besseres Ergebnis auch für uns, für die Europäer im Abkommen mit den Vereinigten Staaten gewünscht. Aber noch sind wir nicht so stark, dass wir autonom in Europa auch solche Fragen auf Augenhöhe entscheiden können. Wir wollen dorthin. Und deswegen brauchen wir eine starke Industrie, aber wir brauchen eben auch Wettbewerb.
Sharad Kohli is on the telecast with me. Sharad, if we discuss the numbers of the distress that is being faced by the auto industry in Germany, just a couple of days ago, there was a statement that was released by Volkswagen, who said it is faced in the last 7 months $1.5 billion of losses because of Trump tariffs. There is a similar estimation that has been made by Mercedes-Benz, $420 million reduced in terms of the bottom line that Mercedes has at this point in time predicted for its production and export. How do you think Europeans, especially Germany, is going to offset these losses, keeping in mind auto industry is its lifeline?
Of course, Megha, about 5 to 6% of the GDP of Germany, comes from auto industry. And obviously, Trump tariffs have caused mayhem around the world. And, I was hearing the professor before me. I mean, apart from what he said about, Indian, Russian oil purchase, I completely agree with him. It's just causing chaos. And I think President Trump doesn't even know that he's probably causing damage to his own economy. We've discussed this so many times. Well, I think as far as Europe and America is concerned, I really don't think there is a deal in the making very, very soon. There are differences on that deal. Several rounds of discussions have happened between America and the representatives of the EU. But nothing very, very substantial has come out. We've been hearing that probably a deal might be happening. They have done it with the UK. The 10% tariffs on the UK is done, but because the UK was in a hurry and they just agreed to whatever Donald Trump administration had to say. But as far as Europe is concerned, I think there is a desperate need for a deal. And even if US does, for example, if it does a 25% tariffs or something, it should not forget that even Europe is buying a lot of Russian oil. Most of the energy needs of Europe are coming from Russia. This is despite 16,500 sanctions on Russia. So I think there's a bit of a hypocrisy, a bit of a paradox here that what is Donald Trump going to do? Is he going to sanction Europe? Is he going to impose secondary tariffs on Europe as well? Apart from we've been talking of the auto tariffs and so it's caused disruption in the automobile companies in Germany without a doubt. Daimler-Benz, a lot of other companies, BMW, they've all suffered losses because there was substantial amount of cars and automobile stuff going to America, which has now come to a standstill. I'm wondering what is America going to do because America does manufacture cars, but the German cars in America are still very, very popular. German cars have got very substantial market in America. So I think America will probably have to wonder as to where will it probably fulfill that gap. And if these cars actually land up in America, then the price is going to be astronomical. I mean, what is America going to do? So I really don't know what Donald Trump is up to. Right. And as far as the Europe and American deal is concerned, we'll have to wait and see as to what comes out. Megha.
Thank you, Sharad, for joining me on the broadcast and sharing your views. Shifting our focus to Israel, where the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar has met with his Croatian counterpart Gordon Grlic-Radman today, and in a joint conference, Sa'ar has strongly condemned the push by several European countries for Palestinian statehood. He warned that unilateral recognition would destabilize the Middle East region and make peace harder to achieve, stressing the importance of bilateral negotiations. Listen in to what he said.
We will not allow the Palestinian Authority, with the aid of foreign countries, to dictate or to determine the final status of disputed territories between us and the Palestinians. It's an illusion to think that the future of Judea and Samaria the cradle of the Jewish people, will be determined in Paris, in Madrid, or in Brussels. It will be determined only in Jerusalem.
Israeli Foreign Minister strongly emphasized that a future peace agreement must be negotiated directly between Israel and Palestine without any external interferences. This meeting comes amidst growing international calls for Palestinian statehood, particularly ahead of United Nations General Assembly to be held later this month. Joining me on the telecast is Alon Pinkas, who's a former Israeli ambassador. He is joining me from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Ambassador Pinkas. And of course, your first reaction about the foreign minister of Israel is in Croatia, and what he has said is he has warned the world and particularly Europe that recognizing Palestine is going to destabilize the Middle East. What do you think is going to be a long-term solution to end the war if it is not recognizing Palestine as a separate state?
Oh my God, the foreign minister contradicted himself twice. First, Israel says that this recognition of a Palestinian state, which hasn't been established, is merely symbolic and declaratory and meaningless. So if that is the case, then why would it destabilize the Middle East as if it's a stable region to begin with? The second is I think he didn't mean it, but nonetheless, it's a contradiction. First, he calls Judea and Samaria, what is known as the West Bank, he calls it the cradle of Jewish civilization, which it is, biblically at least. But then he says these are disputed territories, which is sort of a deviation from government policy. So I don't think he meant it, but it sounds very, to an Israeli ear at least, perhaps less so to an Indian ear, it sounds very strange that he says that. As for the second part of your question, what, in the absence of a recognition of a Palestinian state, look, there's no question, and in this respect, the foreign minister is correct, that this needs to be decided between Israelis and Palestinians, not by the French, not by the European Union, not by the Americans, not by anyone else. Yet at the same time, for the last 45 years of peace negotiations, that hasn't happened. And so now Israel, being isolated and ostracized as a result of the prosecution of the war in Gaza, is facing a very uncomfortable dilemma, because not the entire, but many countries in the world have recognized a Palestinian state, 147 until now, several more, including Israeli allies, such as France, Australia, New Zealand, Britain, intend to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly or on the margins of it's in some convention on a conference, on the margins of the UN General Assembly in 2 weeks' time. And that puts a lot of pressure on Israel. Of course, this recognition and these statements are not going to establish a Palestinian state, but it does push Israel into a corner in which, if not a Palestinian state, then Israel has to come up with an alternative or a substitute solution.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining me and sharing your views. I'm going to shift my focus to France, where the French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau has said that the President, Emmanuel Macron, needs to name a new Prime Minister in face of long-looming protest and strikes action this month following the ousting Parliament of François Bayrou.
Ce que je pense, ce que je vous ai dit sur ce mois de septembre, nous avons besoin très rapidement d'un Premier ministre pour que le pouvoir soit incarné. C'est capital, y compris d'ailleurs en matière de maintien de l'ordre. Et dans ces conditions, je pense que c'est le Premier ministre qui doit être désigné, nommé par le Président de la République, qui doit ensuite être le préfigurateur, c'est-à-dire prendre part aux discussions, se retourner vers l'ensemble des formations politiques pour dessiner justement le chemin dont je vous parlais, qui soit un chemin d'intérêt général pour la France et nos compatriotes. On est sur un mois de septembre, qui est un mois de septembre qui est, si j'ose dire, propice à tous les débordements. Et pour ce qui nous concerne, nous ne voulons pas le chaos.
Meanwhile, the French far-right National Rally leader Jordan Bardella has called for snap elections after Parliament ousted the French Prime Minister Bayrou over his unpopular plans for budget tightening.
Moi, je viens dire que si on ne dissout pas l'Assemblée nationale, si on ne revient pas devant les Français d'une manière ou d'une autre, c'est-à-dire soit par la dissolution du Parlement, soit par la démission du président de la République et par l'organisation d'une nouvelle élection présidentielle qui pourrait permettre au pays de retrouver non seulement un cap, une majorité, mais de la stabilité, alors je ne vois pas comment quelque chose de sain pourrait émerger d'une situation où, encore une fois, je le dis et je le redis, nous n'avons aucune responsabilité. Si M. Macron fait le choix de nommer un nouveau Premier ministre, alors ce Premier ministre n'a aucune autre possibilité que de rompre avec la politique qui est menée depuis 8 ans, auquel cas, les mêmes causes entraîneront les mêmes conséquences et entraîneront par définition une censure du gouvernement. On a besoin de stabilité, on a besoin d'un budget, plutôt nous retournerons aux urnes.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this telecast of